with Tony George unable to join us here on today's show, let's do some Major League Baseball stuff for the last 15 or 20 minutes here of this February 7th edition of Bang the Book Radio. It's a big day in the baseball world. It's a big day in the season win total market because PECOTA projections are out at Baseball Prospectus. Now, this is something that I try to keep in mind. We did see some season win totals out there at Caesars. I believe BetOnline was posted for a little while. I think they're the only offshore that has put up win totals. I could be very wrong with that. Maybe Heritage did as well or something like that. I know when I looked at BetOnline yesterday to try and get some updated numbers, they were not there. But with PECOTA out today, a lot of offshore books are going to start posting now. With the Vegas market already open, there's going to be some brick and mortars out there that do post as well. Now, obviously, there are going to be adjustments to the win total numbers that are out there, and people are going to make their bets based on these PECOTA numbers. So I want to spend a few minutes here talking about PECOTA projections, what I've seen from them, what I believe about them, and, of course, what we're actually seeing here from a win total standpoint. Look at the American League, Houston 99-63. They're the top team. Cleveland and New York tied for the second best record per the PECOTA projections at 96-66. Boston at 90-72. Tampa Bay 86-76. Everybody else in the American League 500 or lower. The Twins 81-81. Angels 81-81. How about this projection for Oakland? 79-83. Not a fan of the offensive profile whatsoever. Not apparently a big fan of the starting rotation either. You can go to baseballprospectus.com, see these PECOTA projections, and also you can go and look at these specific team pages here and see what they're projecting for these starters. And a big reason why PECOTA not a fan of the Oakland A's is because all 5 of their projected starting pitchers listed with an ERA of 4.44 or higher, and a lot of health concerns here for the A's as well. So their starts are really, really spread out. Not a whole lot of love for them. And also looking for, some regression from guys like Steven Piscotty, from guys like Nick Martini, Ramon Laureano, guys that had Martini and Laureano specifically really high BABIPs last season, batting averages on balls in play. Also expecting Matt Chapman to regress offensively as well, with some BABIP decline there for him. Now, what PECOTA uses primarily is they use DRC plus for both pitchers and hitters, and then they'll also be looking at fielding runs above average. This is one of the big things that separates PECOTA from a lot of the other projection systems that are out there, is that it focuses on fielding extensively. So you look at a team like Kansas City, for example, while they're minus 22 in fielding runs, which I think is a pretty bad estimate. I think that Kansas City realistically could have a top 5 defensive outfield. I like their infield defense a little bit. I think Adalberto Mondesi grades fairly well at short. Whit Merrifield's a good second baseman. And obviously Salvador Perez, a very, very good defensive catcher. I think their projection for the Kansas City defense is actually very light. And yet they have them at 71 wins. And we do see that, more often than not, defensive teams get preferential treatment when it comes to PECOTA. You look at the Red Sox, for example, the best defensive team in the American League outside of the Cleveland Indians, interestingly enough. They're plus 27 fielding runs above average. Mookie Betts, Jackie Bradley Jr., you've got a good shortstop there in Xander Bogaerts, Dustin Pedroia coming back at second base. I think that projection's a little bit heavy for their defensive abilities, with somebody like Pedroia and the aging curve. So these are all factors that you want to consider. And one of the reasons why I don't really love PECOTA. I don't think that PECOTA is one of the stronger projection systems out there. I think that there are, some intangibles that PECOTA doesn't really account for. And I think it's the weight that it puts on fielding is a little bit concerning. I mean, look, let's talk about the Cleveland Indians for a minute here. The Cleveland Indians, offensively, Jose Ramirez and Francisco Lindor are going to carry a significant portion of the load here. But you look at their defensive projections here, and they like Tyler Naquin, who's not a very good outfielder. They like Leonis Martin, who's an average type of center fielder, like Jordan Luplow a little bit, but they love Roberto Perez. Roberto Perez, 22 fielding runs above average. Now, one of the things about Baseball Prospectus' fielding data and the PECOTA projections is that they very heavily integrate framing into the equation. Roberto Perez should be a very good framer. Not going to be a good hitter at all, but he's going to allegedly get a lot of value here from his defensive prowess. And while defense is a big help, I think this is one of those things where, at least in my estimation, PECOTA tries too hard to be cutting edge. I think PECOTA tries too hard to incorporate these fielding metrics in there. And when we look at fielding on a year-to-year basis, there's not a great correlation. Defensive runs saved is done by hand. And, ultimate zone rating, UZR, is a little bit of a different formula. It's kind of something where there's not a whole lot of year-to-year correlation, not a whole lot of consistency to it. I think fielding is a tough thing to pin down. And I think it's very scary that PECOTA incorporates fielding to the degree that it does in its projections. So you move down the board here a little bit, and you look at a team like the Chicago Cubs. Chicago Cubs, very, very good offensive team. PECOTA, not a huge fan of their offensive projections, but really doesn't like their defense and has the Cubs down for 82-80. I got updated season win totals at Caesars, texted me from Matt Lindeman yesterday. Chicago was at 92 in wins. 92. 10 games off of what this PECOTA projection is. So these PECOTA projection systems are going to move the win total market, are going to create the landscape for the win total market out there in the offshore betting market. And I think that people really overvalue what these numbers look like. And that's not to say that I have any sort of projection system that I think is better or anything like that. But as you go up and down the list here, you can see some things that do appear to be flaws. The Mets, with the same number of wins as the Nationals. Look, I love the Mets starting rotation. I think it's very, very good. I think Mickey Callaway and Dave Island are doing a fantastic job with that pitching staff, with that rotation. But being a division winner with 89 wins, scoring just 699 runs based on the PECOTA projections, I can't see that. I think that's a very, very lofty estimate for the Mets. And also, too, look at Oakland. Look at the Mets. The Mets did pick up Edwin Diaz, and their bullpen will be a lot better. But looking specifically here at Oakland, Oakland has a top 5 bullpen in Major League Baseball. It is an elite group, anchored by Blake Treinen, who's one of the best relief pitchers in Major League Baseball. I like Joakim Soria. They spent a good bulk of their free agent resources on him. I like some Lou Trevino, guy that pitched very well until he ran out of gas in the second half. Oakland's got some very, very good relief arms. Fernando Rodney, still a solid type of guy. Maybe he's not a closer type, but still a solid reliever. I think PECOTA falls short projecting bullpens. I think it's one of those things. Look at the Indians, for example. The Indians starting rotation is phenomenal. It's the best in baseball. I'm not sure anybody comes all that close to the Indians this year. Their bullpen is in shambles behind Brad Hand. They don't know who's going to be in any roles. Tyler Olson and Oliver Perez are both very solid, but they're left-handers. Olson, a strictly matchup left-handed guy. Perez can work both sides, but it seems to me like the Indians, offensively and from a bullpen standpoint, not accurately rated by PECOTA. Yes, the rotation is phenomenal. I completely agree. But I do see some pretty clear shortcomings here, I think, in the PECOTA numbers, some things that they failed to acknowledge, some things that they failed to weight properly. Because when you look around Major League Baseball right now, and I'll talk about this a lot when it comes to the bettors box and also a lot when it comes to my season content, the importance of the starting pitcher has never been lower. So many teams. You've got teams using openers. You've got teams going 5 and fly with their starters. Look at the Milwaukee Brewers. They get guys that can survive 5 innings, and they pull them immediately and use their bullpen depth. Ironically enough, the Brewers, very highly thought of here by PECOTA, a lot of that because of their fielding runs and how good their defense is. But I guess it's one of those things where PECOTA falls short recognizing what's going on in the current landscape of Major League Baseball. With the decreased importance of starting pitchers, the increased importance of bullpens, it's something I think the system kind of overlooks a little bit. And you can see that with teams like the Indians and the A's, with teams like the Mets, with teams like, I think the Nationals will be even better than what the PECOTA projections are. It's just, there are some flaws here. And it bothers me that this shapes and sets the win total market so much. But quite frankly, I'm kind of happy about it because when I saw those Caesars numbers come out, I didn't think there was a whole lot of value. I thought they were very, very tight from a season win total standpoint. Now that PECOTA's out there and the market paradigms are going to shift a little bit, I see teams relative to the PECOTA projections that I do really like. And I would tell you those, but I'm not finished with all of my research yet. And I do want you to be on the lookout for my MLB betting guide here later in the month of February. We'll have it as a Kindle ebook. We'll have it as a PDF. And we'll also have it on the team-by-team page articles over at BangTheBook.com. So there will be a lot of ways to get my MLB betting guide. I've got to do some final edits for the American League and then start on the National League. But as I go through and look at the American League here, there are teams that I do like relative to their PECOTA projections. That's not to say I think PECOTA is way off with a lot of these teams, but I do think that PECOTA coming into the market has added some value for us that I don't think was previously there based on the numbers that I saw at Caesars. So I'm excited about that. But, again, for me, baseball, this is the one sport where I feel like I have some level of expertise because I come at it from a quant standpoint. I dig deep into the numbers. I dig deep into the sabermetrics. And college football was very good to me. I was very good in the nugget for college football with my power ratings and, with having more of a numbers basis. When it comes to college basketball, the NBA, and the NHL, I'm more of a situational type of, and I think there's more of a gray area in trying to handicap motivation, trying to handicap what travel actually means. I think we could actually sink your teeth into the numbers. That's why Danny Vorgs over at BangTheBook.com had so much success with his NFL power ratings. They're numbers based. There are formulas involved. These are lines and totals that are spit out by the model that he has. And I think that's a really strong way to go about it. So that's why I feel so strongly about my baseball positions, about my baseball handicapping, because I come at it from that, numbers-based analysis standpoint. So, while PECOTA is very clearly numbers-based, and any projection system is going to be, I think that there are some things that I do differently in my handicapping that, do allow me to have some success relative to these win total numbers. So, I talked about the American League already, and I'm not as well versed in the National League as of yet, but the Dodgers, the number one team, 95 and 67. The Brewers, Nationals, and Mets, all 89 and 73 per the PECOTA projections. Cardinals, 86 and 76. The Rockies, 85 and 77. Braves and Phillies, 84 and 78. And few interesting things here about the National League. One of them, obviously, is that it's not as top-heavy. You've got one team over 90 in the National League. You've got 5 teams at 90 or better or 4 teams at 90 or better in the American League, including a team with 99 wins in Houston and 2 with 96 in the Indians. There's a lot more parity in the National League here this season. I think you've got 4 good teams in the NL East. I think you've got 3.5 good teams in the Central. I think the Reds and Pirates a little bit behind the Cubs, Cardinals, and Brewers, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Reds or the Pirates do make a push here over the course of the season. And then in the West, the Dodgers are very good. The Rockies, I do have some questions about, and I will expand on them a lot in my betting guide and in my preseason research. The Diamondbacks in a rebuild. The Padres and the Giants do look like bottom feeders there. But again, where you look at the PECOTA projections for the American League, and you've got 4 teams with 90 or more losses, you've got 2 in the National League, the Marlins and the Giants. And in fact, I think the Giants could be a little bit better than people think based on some of my initial research. So the National League looks very wide open here in terms of the Dodgers are the best team. And then after that, really teams 2 through 8, I think are, anybody's guess. And those are the types of leagues I like. The ones where you have some higher variance environments where you've got a Mets team that if they won 89 games, if everybody stayed healthy and everything worked out well, I wouldn't be totally shocked. Also, if they were a team that finished around 500 or even had a losing record, I wouldn't be totally shocked with that either. Those are the types of teams I like. I like to be able to dig into teams that have a higher range of outcomes. In the American League, I don't think there are as many teams that have a higher range of outcomes. Houston will be very good. New York and Boston will be very good. Cleveland will be better than people think, even though there's all this sensationalism out there. The teams that are kind of in the middle, Tampa Bay, Minnesota, Oakland, Los Angeles, those are teams I've kind of keyed in on as teams I think do have some win total value because there's that higher range of potential outcomes. And to give you an overall general point here on my season win totals, I understand I'm going off the cuff. I mean, Tony sent me an email about 10:45 Eastern time that he couldn't make the show. So I'm going off the cuff here a little bit. My thoughts are far more organized when it comes to the bettors box. But, when you look at some of these projections here and you look at what's going on with some of these teams and some of the perceptions out there about them, I like to look for teams where I think my perception differs from the market. I like to go against the grain when it comes to baseball because, as I said, I come from a quant background in baseball with my study of sabermetrics, but I think there are too many people that only use sabermetrics or only believe in the old school philosophies. And I think I blend the two together. I'm certainly far more on the sabermetric side of the spectrum, but I think I'm willing to not be as hard line with sabermetrics. And it's something that does bother me about the sabermetric community is that there are so many people that are like, well, no, his xFIP was this and his ERA was this, and he's absolutely going to regress. And I dig deeper. I dig into that second and third level. And I think that's something that gives me an edge from a baseball betting standpoint and will give me an edge from a season win total standpoint as well. I think I've got a pretty good balance, and I'm always trying to achieve a better balance. But I think I've got a pretty good balance between the two schools of thought. And one of the things about these PECOTA projections is that I think they're very hardline. I think that, they try to organize this in a way that there's no wiggle room. And I think that's just wrong. I think there is a lot of wiggle room here, especially when you talk about the National League where you've got so many teams that could be in the hunt for division titles in the East and the Central, and then obviously for the wild card berths as well. So I'm very excited to see these numbers. I'm excited to have another frame of reference to go along with the depth charts, standings projections at Fangraphs, and then the great work that Dan Zimborski does with the Zips projections. All of it is very good fodder for me. All of it helps me sort of organize and shape what the market looks like, and then I'm able to differentiate based on my thoughts, based on what I'm looking at. So this is a very important time of the baseball year for me, arguably the most important time of the baseball year for me. So if you're somebody who wants to start diving into baseball because you just don't like basketball or maybe you're not a hockey guy, something like that, you have resources available now. And I will analyze and interpret those resources in that MLB betting guide here later this month. But you can look at PECOTA, you can look at depth charts, you can look at the Zips projections, the Steamer projections, and start to get an idea of where the market may rate these teams. And then look and see where you can find your edges, find your values by going against the grain or by maybe liking teams a little bit more than some of these projection systems do. Because keep in mind, there's going to be a defined range. Yes, you've got Baltimore as an outlier here. You're not going to find many years where PECOTA projects a team to lose 100 games. You're not going to find years where PECOTA projects a team to win 100 games. There's going to be a range, but there are going to be teams that lose 100 and win 100, usually, more often than not. So a lot of good resources, a lot of good starting points here from a Major League Baseball standpoint. And again, I apologize for kind of bouncing around and being all over the map here a little bit. Again, just sort of going from the seat of my pants here a little bit with the last segment here for this show. But again, I love baseball. I think I'm something of a good resource for our listeners out there. I sent off my Bettors Box Notes last year, had an email list of well over 100 people that wanted my Bettors Box Notes after the podcast. So, if you're interested in baseball, I think I'm a pretty good follow for information. I think I'm a pretty good resource for information at BangTheBook.com. And I will be doing more of it here on the shows as we go forward, especially as, guests kind of drop away because they're more football oriented. And as, we try to talk some different things other than just college basketball because the NBA is a tough market, just doesn't have mass appeal. So we'll be doing a lot more baseball stuff here as we go forward. But, again, I apologize for sort of bouncing around and going off the cuff here. But, again, we'll be organizing my baseball thoughts a lot more throughout this month. And, of course, as we head on into the month of March as well. So, as I mentioned, I've got that Friday segment with Christian Pina on UFC 234. I'll have that scheduled to post here tomorrow morning. We'll have that posted as Bang the Book Radio, for iTunes. We'll also have the segment up across Spreaker and Stitcher and Spotify and all of our other platforms as well.